Welcome to another episode of Positive Solutions for Life. This is Peggy Meyer. Today's guest is Deanne Dietz. Wherever you go, there you are by Jon Kabat Zinn is what started it all for Deanne after receiving a diagnosis of ADD or attention deficit disorder in her late 20s. She became a brain health coach with Amen Clinic and used herself as a test subject to get her brain back. Her interventions led her to have a ninja focus and productivity, and then follow her passion and become a relationship coach and trauma therapist specializing in EMDR intensives. So, welcome to the podcast, Deanne.
Good morning. Thank you.
I'm
Glad
so
to be
excited
here.
for our conversation. I think, as a former therapist, and, this is anything related to brain and mind and stuff is always of interest to me. So, if you could start the conversation by just sharing a little bit more about you and how it has led to where you are today.
Sure thing. I'm so thankful that there's the super brainiac, smart people in the world, the neuroscientists who can dissect all this for us. And then as a therapist, my goal is always like, what do I do with that? How do I
Mhm.
use it in some way? Because getting that diagnosis, well, on the one hand was like, oh, that's okay. That's why I feel like this.
Right.
It also felt like a stuck place, like, oh, is this the rest of my life? And that
Mhm.
wasn't okay with me.
Yeah.
So I had always been told as a kid, my report cards say, Deanne does not work up to her potential. Or, I got A's easily, but there was, I wasn't engaged or I didn't do more.
Mhm.
But I also felt really overwhelmed with the world. I was a super sensitive kid. And so knowing that that ADD is like a blessing in a way, I can
Mhm.
get lost in or totally absorbed in the
Mhm.
things that matter to me or the things that
Yeah.
are of interest. And I think, a lot of kids in particular or adults can criticize themselves like, wait a minute, if I can focus so much on this, why can't I,
Mhm.
make these other things happen? And I think, with the journey that I've had, finally getting to the place of whether I'm trying to write a book or a blog or do website work or see clients, it's, what is my energy right now? How can I use what I do know to guide myself, but then also not try to force it?
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting because, as a formal therapist, I just like I've had a lot of people in my office, and I actually have some friends too that have had a diagnosis of either ADHD or ADD later in life. But, in all aspects, there you brought up a good point is like, how do I use these as a positive and a benefit to you? Because I feel like some people use it as an excuse to like justify their behaviors without like trying to understand it and like use it to the best thing. Because, like you said, I think hey, you could get like immersed in something. And I think that would be awesome. I could get immersed in a project or immersed in something, which could be really good, but it may kind of hinder some other things. So, can you speak a little bit about like that, at least for you?
I think it can lead to burnout or rigidity. Early on, I learned a lot of brain health tools and had the attitude more of like, I'm going to overcome this, I'm fighting this.
Mhm.
And while, managing my sleep and eating well and exercising and having a morning routine, all of those things are super helpful. I think I first took it to the extreme, from my thinking mind, I'm going to solve this.
Yeah.
So, a lot of focus on high performance. I even I wrote a book to about 80%, and then all those details I
Yeah.
couldn't finish, but on high performance, and so really immersed myself in how do I still have the life I want. But what was missing is fun. Like I didn't laugh. I wasn't, feeling fully present. I was getting a lot of stuff done and being super, I started a business and I kept changing my focus because I would get bored with, the,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
topic I was on. But I did a lot of home remodeling and learned how to do them. I was getting a lot of things done, but there wasn't that sense of fulfillment.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I became a certified brain health coach to really cure myself, and it really did improve a lot of my symptoms.
Mhm.
But then came this next phase of like there's got to be something more other than managing myself.
Mhm, mhm. Can you dive in a little bit more on, like, what did you learn in that process of, like, being your helping yourself, being that brain coach? I mean, there's a lot, is it easy to find information about it? Where do people go? Like, how did
Mhm.
you get into that? Because it's not just ADD or ADHD. I think we all have, like, some part of our brain that we would like to, enhance or become better, or, just dig in a little bit more. So where can people go? Like, how easy is it? How did you do it?
I was fortunate enough that as an elementary school counselor, seeing the amount of kids that were getting diagnosed and wanting something better for them, but I was the one writing the plans of what needs to be done.
Mhm,
And so, really seeking that information out at that level led me to the Amen Clinic.
mhm,
And at the time, it was pretty new to be seeing the brain spect imaging and the information it was giving us.
mhm,
This was in I think, early mid 2000s. And so, getting that original information gave me clues of like this is a whole health approach, right? It's about once you do the screener, you know which type of brain you have. So, where is there overactivity or where is there underactivity, and then there's certain dietary recommendations. So for mine, it was higher protein, lower carb.
mhm,
For everybody, it's watch the sugar, soy, corn, just all the typical, things that throw us off.
mhm.
And then get movement, like get blood flow to the brain.
Yeah.
And so for some people, that's, really intense aerobic. And nowadays, when I wake up and really do my check-ins, the feedback I'm getting from my body is more, I want strength training, and then so I do the aerobic more
Mhm,
as I crave
mhm,
it,
mhm.
which will is because of mindfulness, because of, instead of
Right.
just, but the list says I need to do intense aerobic first thing in the morning. There's much more of a, okay, but what's my check-in? What's my body scan saying
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
But early on, so the exercise, the food type, later we're learning more about gut health and how important that
Mhm,
is to our brain. But even more so is how to increase the dopamine more. And I did do medication for a period of time, I think about 5 or 6 years. I personally don't like it because I felt like strung out the whole time, and even
mhm,
on a kid's dose as an adult, um, it wasn't for me. But
mhm,
doing that, if that's what it takes to get your house in order and get those routines in
mhm,
place. So, on the Amen Clinic website, there is still a brief assessment where you can get a sense of like what type of brain you have, and now they have it in more user friendly terms. And so instead of saying, you have overactivity in your basal ganglia, it says, oh, you're more of the cautious type.
okay.
Um,
Well, that would
and
be
then,
helpful because not everybody else
yeah,
knows. I was like, "What? Like, what does that mean?"
yeah,
Like
yeah. And, all of these tools, I think we can all benefit from
Mhm.
organization and asking ourselves, like, what kind of information is helpful for me today?
Yeah.
So that's what really helped, kind of this second layer. There's the basic brain health, get
Mhm,
good sleep, eat well, move, clean environment, not having the allergens, even and what
mhm,
chemicals, what kind of
mhm,
overhead lighting, blue light exposure, caffeine, all those things. Then the second level is really about what am I exposing myself to? So am I waking up and looking at emails or
mhm,
Facebook, or exposing myself to drama? Do I have high drama friends, or am I getting involved in other people's business just because, like, to get that stimulation in the brain,
yeah, yeah.
or having conflict with people because it gives stimulation, not because it's really helpful? So
That's an interesting
tracking
point.
thoughts tracking thoughts is another whole thing we could dive into, but
Yeah.
simply asking myself, is this helpful or hurtful? If
Mhm,
I'm driving somewhere or about to meet a friend and my mind is going in all directions, like, is this helpful or hurtful? Like, is me reviewing all the things I need to do later helping me get those things done, or is it
mhm.
just making me not present to refilling and connecting and feeling meaning in my life?
Right, right. And I feel like, I wanna bring up, like, I hear a few times, like, the mindfulness, like, and just, like, stopping and asking yourself, like, "What is my body really needing?" Like, "Is my is these thoughts helpful right now?" So can you dive into, how mindfulness maybe I mean, I feel like that's an important piece for your story, and can you dive into that a little bit more?
Sure. In my 20s, even before considering if I had ADD or not, I was so like, fill every moment. There's so much to do, and I want to get so many places, and I have so many ideas. And
Mhm,
so, whether that was, a painting project, like a for fun painting project, or a remodel, or, I want to take another class, there was so much to do. And including seeing friends became kind of more of a to do. I've got 10 minutes before I meet this person, so I'll make that phone call. But then being late and rushing and
mhm.
not being fully present. And I didn't even know I wasn't fully present.
Right.
It was just the way of life.
Yeah.
So when I came across, it was back in the day when we went to the library and had a cassette tape to listen to. Wherever you go, there you are. And it was such a foreign concept.
Mm.
And I'm pretty sure it's in that book that he has the eating a raisin exercise of like, just every little step, right? Of
Yeah.
like, it's coming into your mouth, and, now you're just feeling the texture. And then once the chewing starts and noticing every little thing to it,
Mhm.
it was so, like, enlightening, like, life became, like, richer and more facets to every
Mhm.
little thing that was
Mhm.
happening, and back then, I could only do it with, really focused attention, like, right now,
Yeah.
I'm going to I used to pride myself on I could take a 7-minute lunch, I could go into the staff room, microwave soup, stand up at the sink and, chug it down and go back to work. And yet, if I could just even for one spoonful, because, I hadn't shifted all my thoughts. I
Yeah.
had trauma work to clear out. I was doing
Mhm.
all that to feel worthwhile and, really
Mhm.
feeling driven. I had been a coping skill for so long. But if I could just for that one bite,
Mhm.
take a moment.
Yeah.
Or if I was talking to someone, if for just for a moment I could be like, just be here. Just
Mhm.
just receive what's happening
Mhm.
right now. Don't even be thinking about how you're going to help this person. Like you'll think of that in a moment. Or even if you have to say, okay, well, that's an interesting problem. Let me see what I can do. Like it's okay. Right now you can just be with. And so if those little moments started to add up because of that wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I'm like, oh, I got to get that book just to like read it because it feels like, you something that hit me is just like, being a little mindful or just taking a moment like creates a more richer life. And it's in those moments. Don't we remember the moments more, like the snapshots of things versus like the blur of another day? Like, that one exercise of like slowing down and just appreciating every little step in like having a raisin, instead of having a handful of raisins, it's
Yeah,
like,
right.
it's rushed at you. So, like, how did that help, like, with ADD?
Well, this is where the neuroscientists come in, and, I have a surface level understanding, I do
Mhm.
screeners for brain health, and then I send them to people who have, really dedicated their lives to this, but my understanding is that when we're in that moment, having that richer experience, then there's more dopamine being produced, so we're more
Mm,
engaged, we're more stimulated when we can be curious about something, when we can fully experience it, then we're not chasing the 5 other things because we're trying to get the dopamine hit. And so it's really starting to then be able to also downregulate the nervous system, right? Not having to be in that fight flight because being in the moment, there's more information about like, oh, everything's okay right now. Like you're
mhm,
enough, or nothing bad happened. You
mhm.
still got stuff done when you take those moments to enjoy.
Yeah, so those moments, like, I wanna go back to, like, it increases your dopamine by, like, just chilling and embracing the moment. I think that is such an I mean, that hits me as such an odd concept because we're always, like,
Counterintuitive.
chasing
Yeah.
that dopamine hit. You think about addicts, we think about, like, the sugar highs, we think about all of that. It's like we're chasing this, like, we want this moment, and we feel like we have to go outside of ourselves to get it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what you're saying is if we get mindful, that triggers that dopamine hit.
It allows the full experience and ongoing mindfulness, if somebody can only do it for 30 seconds, that's what I start my clients, 15 or 30 seconds, like,
Mhm.
and then we build into 3 minutes, and then we think about, however far that's gonna go.
Right.
But, when I did mindfulness over time, then I started to get more signals from within.
Mhm.
And those signals started directing me. So then I could have discernment instead of chasing so many things based on my high performance list of what needed to be accomplished in all areas. And I love people like Brenda Bouchard, who, the
Mhm.
different categories of life and rating, are they getting enough attention and what else do you want to do? And
Mhm.
but what I was missing was that connection of, but which of these things matter to me?
Mhm.
What am I fulfilled in already? And then which things need to maybe have some boundaries around because,
Mhm.
oh, I already was helpful to people, or I already did some community things. How about giving myself permission to be alone
Oh,
and
yeah.
listen or go out to nature by myself or have a home day, dance around the house, do whatever to feel inside, and
Mhm.
then that would notice like, oh, I'm really antsy about, or oh, I'm really missing this,
Mhm.
fulfillment, and then that would start to steer where I was going to put my attention.
Yeah. Yeah. So what comes up for me is I have this kind of saying that I often say is in the quiet of the mind, the heart speaks. So if we're able to quiet the brain down and be more mindful in the moment, you're saying that those messages within that are there come out more or we can hear them.
Yeah, they are always there. And I have to be careful with telling myself that the end goal is to quiet my mind, because there was a time in my life when that didn't feel emotionally safe.
Mhm, mhm,
Either, hey, but I have a business to run, or at one point I was working two jobs to get the business going, or, I've
mhm.
committed to this, community event that I need to get things done, and I don't have time to be quiet. And
Yeah,
so the mindfulness became more about, okay, how about while I'm making these sandwiches for the homeless that I could, sit with, what my heart is feeling right now,
yeah.
or what my thoughts are, and so watching myself more,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then that started to bleed into all the interactions, which then leads to quieting and being more present. But if
Mhm.
I have the goal to do that, my thinking, my messes that up.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I hear lots of people that are like, "Oh, I'm supposed to try meditating, but it's supposed to quiet my I'm supposed to have my mind quiet, and that doesn't work." And it's like, "No, really, like, it's here. It's heart-centered is where you're trying to go." But
Yeah.
sometimes we have to, like, we're too much in our heads to be able to hear what's going on. But yeah, there's those different aspects of there's oftentimes we can't shut this thing off, you know?
Yes, exactly. And sometimes I have to tell it, like, "I hear you, like, I get that that's a priority for you," and I've even built that into my morning routine. So, when I wake up, first just doing a brief body scan of just
Mhm,
noticing, like,
mhm.
so what do I feel like physically? And maybe sometimes that's, "Oh, knees, yeah, I'm feeling that activity I chose to do yesterday. I feel ya. Thanks for your hard work. Okay, we'll build in some more, strength training for you."
Yes, yes.
And then I feel like I don't get yelled at as much back, or maybe there's, a reflection from,
Mhm,
something that, I either missed from the day before or was still on my heart. There's a lot of
mhm.
things going on in the world that I can take a moment and be like, "Yeah, heart, like, you're still feeling the effects of that. I'm with
Mhm.
you." So
Mhm.
that then it doesn't seem to drain me. It just seems
Mhm.
to, like, once we acknowledge, and I think of even when we're in a conversation with anybody, right? If we have
Right.
something to say and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I totally agree," and then they change the subject, we're fine. But if they just go on to something else, we're like, "But hey, yeah, I can't let it go."
We
So
wanna
I
be
think
acknowledged.
right. So I think that quiets my mind when,
Mhm.
whatever it's saying to me, I can say, "Okay, yeah, I hear you that you
Mhm.
think that's a priority." And the body is saying, or my heart is longing, or, these other values I have.
Right.
And so that brings up something else of on this journey was getting clear about what matters to me. There was one book that said, you have to narrow down your values to your top 5. And I love that. I mean, I did have a list of 20, and I still like, yeah, these are my kind of
Mhm.
secondary priority. But when life gets overwhelming, I start thinking of, okay, but are my 5 taken care of? And or is this the highest and best use of my time right now based on where my 5 are? And so then that kind of replenishes me for those periphery things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really, you talked about being really clear on your 5 values. I think that we have to stop and think about those. We have to take those time to, like, look at, okay, what are my values? So we know how to direct our lives.
Yeah.
And I really like the point of acknowledging what your body's feeling. Like you said earlier in the conversation, is just like, do I feel like an intense workout, or, I need a little bit more of a recovery day? I mean, I can feel it if I'm like, one day I'm like, yay, I feel like good, intense, and, I can go for that run. And then the next day I'm like, whoa, the knees are screaming at me because, like, remember, I don't like doing this.
Yeah.
But the rest of the body was okay with it. So just acknowledging those, and it seems to work. It seems that, and it just goes back to, we want to be acknowledged too by other people. And our body, spirit all wants to be acknowledged.
Yes.
And how do we create that routine where we check in with ourselves? That morning body scan,
Yeah.
brain and body scan is a great exercise.
It was that mindfulness that leads to the values, because if I'm more mindful, then I can
Mhm.
sense what gives me a little lift, or like "Ooh, what's that?" or
Mhm.
and that's subtle. But if I'm attuned to myself, then I can feel those things. And, yeah, when I first started looking at values, it was like, well, what pissed me off today? Or what did I get really excited about today?
Mhm.
And that's all I could read. But then it becomes more subtle of like, what felt warm in my heart,
Mhm.
or what helped, kind of, I feel it almost like a warm shower or a hug,
Yeah.
what really helped me
Yeah.
settle in and go, yeah, this is what life's about.
Yeah.
And that led me to a next phase of really longing for more spirituality, and a
Mm.
whole journey around that, and how do I live connected so that I'm not just on this path of doing and accomplishing. What's it
Right.
all for?
Right, right. Because I feel like people are really generally wanting to make an impact. and wanting to do good, but are often caught up in the day to day.
Yeah.
And so mindfulness, and I like how you said it being in tune, because sometimes I think I, in practice, in my private practice, I often had people like define what they mean by certain words, and certain words hit people differently. So mindfulness, somebody could just like, yeah, I totally embrace that. Just like exercise. Like I use exercise as a word and somebody was just like, ooh, I
Sure.
hate that word. That it was a negative type word to them. So we had to change it to just like moving the body. Oh, that felt better.
Feeling
So,
alive.
like
Yeah.
some people, attuning into ourselves, tuning into ourselves might feel a little bit more subtle, a little bit more that they could embrace than this mindfulness word. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
take whatever word works for you. But I just lost my train of thought. So
It's
wherever we're
okay.
going with
That's
that,
good.
so
Yeah.
go ahead.
In full catastrophic living, it does talk about 45 minutes a day, or there's, some, the mindfulness-based stress reduction program
Mhm.
is 45 minutes a day. But most people that I meet and myself early on, like that, I'm not going to take time for that.
Yeah.
And so, let alone am I even spending 45 minutes a day on things I value. And during that era of my life, I really had this thing of like, well, first I have to do these things. I have to get the to-do list done. Which reminds me of another strategy of don't see the full to-do list because it's never done, right?
Yeah.
And so really it's more, okay, what block of time do I have to even work on something? And
Mhm.
then of this whole list, if I could only get one thing done, and then does that align with one of those top 5 values? How about just start there? And noticing that I would get so much more done
Mhm.
if I just did it that one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And there would be times when for months, the rest of that list didn't get done. And then I'd go, oh, maybe that wasn't that important to me. Because if I'm not
Mhm.
doing it, it's clearly not a priority. As much as some part of my mind might be yakking at me that it is,
Right.
life has gone on pretty good without it.
Yes, yes, I know. That just I've done that before. Is just like brain dumped this whole thing of what I want to do. And then eventually, you pick out things that are important in the moment for you. And then some things just fall off the list. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't even remember why it was important. And
Yeah.
and so it's okay.
I was so bad at time management that I had color coded my calendar. I still choose to use a paper calendar, but
Yep.
color coding. But what I realized is I didn't leave time for, in the morning I would say I'm going to get these things done before work, then I come home and I have to accomplish these things. But there was no, what about travel time? What about get ready time?
Yep.
Oh, and what about those important things in lifetime? It was more like, oh, well, I could be on the phone with these important people while I'm traveling, and that would be an efficient use of my time. But that's just so overwhelming. And that's just
Mhm.
that go, go, go mode
Mhm.
that now I build in, okay, and I know I need a certain amount. I'm an introvert, so I'm 2 hours a day is blissful to have of like just nothing on the schedule, and I'll decide what I feel like doing,
Right.
and that's when the mindfulness might happen, or a spiritual journey, or going out in nature, or some other exercise that are
Mhm.
all good. But learning to manage that assigner, the taskmaster
Yeah.
in there by saying, oh, and where is that going to get done? Like, oh, look, these slots are all used. I guess it's gonna have to be on Friday instead.
Yeah. But we need to build it in every day
Yeah,
because we want a full life. We want to live our full potential. But if we max ourselves out in push, 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 like every single day, we're going to hit that burnout, like you talked about earlier.
yeah. It's a
And
trick in the mind. If I can do it all, then I'll feel okay.
right,
But the truth is, when you get it all done, it's like, there's more, more, more.
right.
And that leads us back to because it's really trying to get that dopamine stimulation, but then
Mhm.
we're lacking the meaning in life. And, maybe what are all the other ways that we can get dopamine stimulation, like
Mhm.
a bath or a hug or connection to things that
Mhm.
really matter to us. And for some people, that's, by seeing contribution that they're doing, or for others, it's more of a private contribution, like attending to what's there for them, or raising children or animals or plants, or whatever the thing is, it's
Yeah.
having that sense of meaning, or deeper meaning
Mhm.
assigned to things that also helps stimulate the brain in that same way.
Yes, yes. And that dopamine can happen in the meaningful moments. And
Yeah.
I think that's a big shift for a lot of people.
And my focus today has been on building the dopamine because when I did the assessment, and I do brain health assessments for people where we can narrow down like which type of ADD or ADHD do they have, as well as screening for many other things, because
Mhm.
depression can look like ADD
Yep.
or a lack of fulfilled life or poor boundaries. But the assessments have expanded now to gut health and adrenals and thyroid. What are all the things that can be disguising? Um, and I also just lost my train of thought right there.
Yeah.
Um,
No.
I've been focusing on the dopamine. So
Mhm.
in those assessments, it can also flush out. Like maybe it's an overactivity in the limbic system or basal ganglia, and then those would be some different types of interventions. The basic brain health is all the same, but there
Mhm.
might be some other nuances for those folks, whether it's boundaries or trauma clearing,
Yeah.
which eventually then I realized I had some other layers to do, and
Mhm.
that helped. EMDR in particularly helped clear this incessant need to be doing because of a lack of self worth, as opposed to because those were really fulfilling.
Yeah, yeah. Let's touch briefly on what EMDR is, just because I'm a former therapist and, we throw out these acronyms,
Oh, sure, yeah.
and I don't know if, listeners know exactly what that is and what you're talking about. So can you just do a brief explanation
Yeah.
of what that is?
The cool thing is people are asking for it by name a little bit more, but yeah,
Yeah.
does anybody know what
Yep.
it is? So it's called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And basically, the old talk therapy, we could have ahas. We could have where
Mhm.
in one part of our brain we had this old story. For example, mine of like I must accomplish in order to be worthwhile.
Mhm.
And then we have this new, the higher level part of the brain, the part that gets developed by about age 25. So it wasn't there to manage that early stuff
Right.
before all those pathways got created. The new way says, yeah, but you're really busy in your life, you're overwhelming yourself, so you're not getting these things done, or you don't really know what's important to you. And yet this part feels so driven and so those thoughts, those behavior patterns drive our life and then we're unfulfilled. So there EMDR is just a mechanism now that we can use to stimulate both parts of the brain, neurons that fire together, wire together.
Mhm.
So we want to be able to repattern the brain. So we bring up that old stuff while we're stimulating the new stuff. I'm totally oversimplifying, but
Yep.
when those two can I often say this one's mentoring this old.
Yeah. Yeah.
The beauty of EMDR therapy is we can weave in other types of therapy for whatever that client needs. So if
Mhm.
they need to start with mindfulness, or for a lot of my clients, it's nervous system regulation.
Mhm.
How do they soothe? How do they release? So somebody who's high on anxiety is trying to take deep breaths and calm down. No, how about like shake it all out, do a ragdoll dance, like move that energy. So
Mhm.
getting to know the body a little bit better before we start going through all that stuff. So
Mhm.
in traditional talk therapy, we might keep talking around it, but if we're not making those new connections, it's
Mhm.
not helping update the brain.
Right, right. Because those hardwired pathways from when we're younger, I mean, are like interstate highways.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And we're trying to like create other roads, on top of them. And it's just,
It can feel like being on an
yeah.
animal trail in the woods trying to do the new
Yes.
behavior, yeah.
And you're like, ah. And so I feel like it's a great way to intersect those quicker than
It is,
it is
yeah,
and easier than, just talking around it,
yeah.
traditional
10
pathways.
years of traditional talk therapy, yeah, in 1 or 2 years tops of EMDR,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot
And
quicker.
there's all sorts of layers of where that can go because EMDR can weave in early childhood repair. So I do
Mhm,
these 3 or 6-hour intensives, really meaning to like rebuild all of that childhood foundation for many people with complex PTSD. But there's also induced after death communications for people who are grieving. So there's
mhm,
lots of other
mhm.
modalities that are now connected with the EMDR to serve people,
Yeah,
and all of it's brain based. All
yeah,
of it, as we can understand the brain more, now we have more power, that we're not stuck with these symptoms. Those
mhm,
symptoms, yes, my brain was doing that, but it was based on what I was raised with, the chaos and the,
mhm.
having to focus on everything out there. And so, yeah, my brain wired in that way. And getting thrown off a horse, actually twice I had
Oh,
blackouts from getting thrown off a horse, probably didn't help the brain,
well,
but
no.
our brain is what's the word? We can rebuild our brain.
Yeah,
The hippocampus is kind of like this train station where it takes in information and then
mhm,
sorts things out. But when we have stress, it kills the cells of the hippocampus. And so being able to manage that stress, like using mindfulness to track our thoughts and then focus our attention, is a great way to, rebuild that hippocampus in a way that as information's coming in, it's not overwhelming and we can really mindfully say, okay, is this a priority? Is this something I'm going to put my focus on?
yeah, yeah. So much good information. Where can people find more out about you? Just, more about your therapy, how you help people, anything.
Sure. I have a website, www.hearthealing.org/intensive, that if that's of interest, and then a YouTube page at Deanne D.
Right. Great. I'll put those in the show notes so people can easily access those. So this has been a great
Wonderful.
conversation on just, brain health, mindfulness, the importance of getting in tune with ourselves to be able to, give ourselves like the dopamine, the feel good stuff that we really want. So is there a thought or quote that you would like to leave the listeners with?
I think if any of this is overwhelming, it's just do something. Like something is
Mhm,
better than nothing. 15 seconds. If you don't have that, do 5 seconds. If you don't have that, do 1 second. Like do what you can with what you have. And
mhm,
that's where to me I think of it as like a pinhole of light in the closet, right? It's like,
mhm.
just look for where is that one opportunity and start there. And the next thing you know, it'll be more of that your passion is guiding, what you do instead of all this stuff that our world,
Mhm.
says is important to us.
Yeah, because we can get bombarded with so many things. Oh, try this, try this, try this. But just
Yeah,
choose one. Just choose the simplest one that you can and start
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
start. Well, thank you
Thank you
so
for this. It's
much
been a
for
great
joining
reminder to
us.
myself. Yeah.
I know. I often tell in my therapy sometimes, when I do that, I was like, you know what? Oh, that was great advice. I need to
Guess I
take that
needed to
to
hear that
my
today.
life.
Yeah. Great.
So
All
I'm
right.
glad we
Well,
could have
take
this
care.
conversation and,
Thank you.
enlighten ourselves in the process. So thank you so much for our
You're
conversation today,
welcome.
Deanne.